How do you pronounce STAHP?
What? That's not a word.
Yes, it is. Well, not really, but it's what the kids say when they really want you to stop doing something.
Is it stop?
I guess.
Stop? I don't know.
Something like that. I don't know.
I'm going to go with stop. Like maybe like the Great Lakes accent. Stop.
Oh, God. Yes, because that's what this podcast needs is more talk about regional accents.
Yes, definitely.
I actually got called out at work today in a happy way. A coworker asked me, a coworker that I just started working with, asked me if I was from Jersey. Well, that part wasn't happy at all. That was miserable. But point being, I said mash on something as in to like hit emphatically or repeatedly, and apparently that's a Northeastern thing, or so I'm told.
Well, that's a drink in Great Britain, right? Smush or whatever.
Oh, that was squash that you're thinking of.
Squash. Oh, okay. I thought it was smush. Did we?
Thing, right?
So Tiff's opinion of that, when she heard this, she said it's probably like getting like frozen fruit concentrate here, like the fruit juice concentrate.
I think that's correct from the most I can piece together. But as we talked about on the last episode of Analog, I sent an emergency text to _David Smith, the internet's arbiter of all things UK versus American, and also the internet's historian. And he indicated to me that we do not have anything that's really equivalent to squash.
But we have things that have that name, but it's different. It's like football. It's like, well, we have that, but that's not what you think it is.
Yeah, well, it's either football or a vegetable.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was asking you what's going on with cellular downloads on Overcast. And this is okay because I see in the show notes it says pre-follow-up and then Marco talks.
I did not type that this time.
I don't know who did. Clearly it was John.
Why don't you just keep adding sections? What about pre-follow-up?
We'll get there. Maybe next episode.
What happens if the pre-follow-up generates follow-up? What do we do with it next episode? Where do we put it?
Then it gets lumped into regular follow-up.
It doesn't get pre-follow-up follow-up?
I don't think so. This is getting recursive. I'm uncomfortable. No, I was asking you what's going on with cellular downloads in Overcast because you seem to be stressing out about it quite a bit.
Well, it's, this is a constant battle I have with designing Overcast is like, where do I strike the balance between offering settings for customization versus complexity of the app? Because if you look, like, so many well-featured, well-regarded podcast apps have just these massive setting screens. And it's not because they're badly designed by idiots. It's because it's a hard problem. And when you make a podcast app, everybody asks for all these features. And it's really hard to please a large number of people without adding a ton of options and customizations and features. I've always tried to differentiate Overcast from the other well-established clients by being simpler in those regards. It's really, really hard to keep that up, to manage that. Because like right now I'm working on version 2.0. One of the big features of 2.0 that I'm willing to talk about is streaming. I've been working on streaming for a long time, as I mentioned on this show a couple times in various after shows. It does finally work. It is working. I've been using it myself for the last couple of weeks, and I really like it. It works well. It is solid, and it is awesome.
And to be clear, it works with Smart Speed.
Of course, I wouldn't do it without it.
That's what I thought. Just want to make sure.
Now I have to face the other issues of having streaming in the app. So there are certain options that it needs. Things like, what do you do when a new episode comes in? Do you mark it for streaming or do you download it automatically? There has to be some choice there. There has to be an issue of like, what do you do if you're playing a playlist and the episode that you're on ends and the next episode is a streaming episode, but you are offline? What do you do? No matter what you pick, you're gonna anger some people and you're gonna please some people, and it's really hard to know a lot of times ahead of time which one of those sides will come out ahead. The question I have now is, should I permit cellular data usage for streaming? Because right now I have cellular downloads, and so in a world where in an app that you have mixed streaming and downloads, now you have to have a little more control over that. So it's questionable. So no question, the thing that I agree on, no question, is that cellular data not only will be allowed for streaming, but it will be allowed by default, and it'll be on by default. Because in the world we live in today, I think people widely expect things to just work when you tap them. And lots of other media apps stream by default over cellular and don't ask you first. Things like YouTube or most of the streaming music services. Although I think Apple Music does not. I think they ask you first. But anyway, almost all media streaming apps, they will just do it. If you say play this video and you're on cellular on your phone, it'll just do it over cellular and that's fine. So no question, streaming has to be there and it has to be enabled by default over cellular. The problem is there are lots of and when I posted these tweets, it's funny. Everybody thinks that they have the most advanced worldview on this issue, and of course I'm the stupid American, so I don't know what the rest of the world is like. So I have heard from about equal numbers today of people saying both, in my country we have very bad data plans, so you have to have restrictions, and the rest of the world works this way, and therefore you need to have very strong restrictions. And I've also heard from other people saying, well, in my country, everybody has unlimited data, and that's the world we live in now, and so you don't need to even bother with this. So I've heard both ends of this a lot. But right now, I have 2 cellular options in the app, and I wish I could get away with just one. But right now, I have 2. So the big one, the main one, is whether I allow background or foreground, whatever, when the app downloads full episodes ahead of time or when it gets a notification or whatever. When it downloads full episodes, do you download the whole thing over cellular or do you wait for Wi-Fi? So that is an option. And I think that option is good. That deserves to stick around because if you just stream and you say, all right, play this right now, that's an action you're taking. You're deliberately saying, play this episode right now, and I'm recognizing that I'm playing a podcast while I'm on my phone on a cell network. This might use data. Fine, But if you background download things that just come in, like, overnight, somebody could blow their data cap if a whole bunch of episodes are released by their favorite podcast. Maybe their feed messes up and it releases like 10 new episodes accidentally, and then the phone downloads 10 things over cellular without them even knowing or initiating it. So it makes sense to differentiate between automatic background downloads using it and things that you initiate as the user for playback using it. So that makes sense. You should have an option to disable cellular on background downloads. Fine. But then there's an iOS annoyance that I have. I consider it a bug. I'm not sure that Apple does. For every app that you have on your phone that uses data at all, you can go into settings and you can turn off cellular data usage for the app at the iOS level. So the app doesn't have to have an option for that. You can just go in and disable it, and many people do who are on limited plans who really need to watch their usage. So the problem is, in previous versions of iOS, you've always had this so-called reachability API. It actually has this long CF network, whatever name, but it's shortened. Everyone says the reachability API. And this is the API that can notify you of changes in internet connectivity so that you can, for instance, your app can know whether the connection's offline and when it goes back online. And you can also tell whether it's online via cellular or Wi-Fi or neither, right? So you can make a whole bunch of intelligent decisions, and it isn't perfect. Sometimes it isn't that reliable, but it's pretty close. It's pretty good most of the time. In previous versions before iOS 8, if somebody turned off that cellular option for you in system settings so that they say this app can't use cell data anymore, your app would see when it asked the reachability API, am I online? The system would say, no, you're offline. So the app couldn't tell this switch was on. It just seemed like it was offline. And so if the app tried something, it would show that annoying dialog box that everyone has seen that says, cellular data is disabled for app name. You can enable it in settings. And there's no way for an app to initiate a network connection that does not show that box. So there's no way that I can say, like, I'm going to do a background sync here. If it fails, the user doesn't even need to know. Doesn't matter. It's not that important. Or I'm going to download some artwork for the show that's showing in this table cell. If that fails, it doesn't really matter either. Just, you don't have to alert the user with a modal dialog box saying cell data's off for me downloading an artwork to show in a table cell, right? It doesn't matter. The smart thing to do as a developer in that case was to, before you do something optional that the user didn't really initiate, something like a background sync or an artwork download, check reachability. And if it says it's offline, don't even try. And then that dialog will never show up. Because if you don't do that, then every time somebody goes to your app and it tries to do a background sync and they've disabled cell data for your app, the connection will not only fail, but it'll show that box and it'll annoy the crap out of them. And so then they will write you saying, why does your app keep showing this box? So they don't know it's a system box you don't have any control over. So that's bad. Anyway, with iOS 8, there's what I consider a bug, which is if someone has disabled cellular data for your app in iOS settings, Reachability API will tell you that you are online. It will not say you're offline anymore. So that you have no way to tell whether you are online unrestricted or whether you are online but with cell data disabled. And so you can't avoid making those requests. And you also still can't make a request that's marked as some kind of optional so it doesn't show that dialog box. So therefore, if someone disables that for your app and you try to make a connection, it will show that box every time, or at least once every 10 minutes or whatever. There's some kind of throttling on so it doesn't show them constantly. But it still shows them enough that it annoys people and they email me. So in order to work around this slightly, I had to add the second option called sync over cellular. And it's in my nitpicky details settings level, which is where I bury all my other options. And the reason why this is there is not to let people save data, because it doesn't save that much data. It's to let people avoid that dialog box if they've disabled cell data for my whole app. Because with that, if you trigger that option, then I won't even attempt to make those connections over cellular. Because again, I can't distinguish between cellular that I'm allowed to use and cellular that I'm not allowed to use. So with that setting, that's what that whole thing is for. It's to work around this giant bug in iOS 8 that I think is still there in 9. I'll have to do some tests. Maybe I really hope 9 fixed it, but I don't think it did. But I'll double check before next week, and before our fake next week show, and I'll report back. Because if that fixed it, I can remove that whole option, and that would be awesome. Anyway, sorry for the very long-winded thing here. Anyway, so now faced with the question of adding streaming to this and having some kind of cellular control over streaming. Do I have 3 cellular data options? That's terrible. I'd have to just make a whole separate screen for them and explain. And I will if I have to, but that sounds terrible. Or my best idea so far is to keep the 2 options I have now and just attack streaming to the second one, so that the background downloads is still separately controllable, because that's something I can see somebody wanting to do background downloads only when they're on Wi-Fi, but be willing to stream wherever they are if they actually ask for it. The second option, rather than calling it sync over cellular, rename it to stream and sync over cellular. Does that make sense? I know this is very long, probably very boring. We'll cut all this out.
I think it does make sense. I would probably agree with you that sync over cellular could become stream and sync over cellular. I don't know. It's interesting because I have an unlimited data plan from AT&T on my iPhone. I've gotten grandfathered in, and I've never had a terribly compelling reason to walk away from it. I know that I could probably save a few bucks a month if I didn't keep it anymore, but whatever, it is what it is. However, on my iPad, as I've said numerous times in the past, I have the free 200 megs a month from T-Mobile. And that's typically how I use cellular on my iPad if I'm going to use it at all. And occasionally if I'm on vacation, for example, I'll actually pay for, a few gigs for that month or whatever. But generally speaking, I just live on the 200 megs a month. And so I have gone in on my iPad and turned off cellular data at the iOS level pretty much everywhere. And I can assure you that if I saw that dialogue all the time when using Overcast, it would drive me nuts. So I think you need to stick around with the nitpicky detail version. And I see no reason not to put sync in there, or stream in there. Especially since anytime you're streaming, from what I've gathered from you, any single time you're streaming, like you have said a couple times, it's based on user action. So at that point, I should know what I'm doing, and I should know, no matter how advanced a user I am, if I'm trying to play a podcast that is not on my device, it's going to have to come from somewhere. And if I'm not on Wi-Fi, if I'm not on the fan, as we jokingly call it around these parts, then then I know that it's going to have to go via cellular, and I should be able to figure that out. So I think you've got the right approach, but I'm curious to hear what John has to say.
Well, and there is one little complexity that you said, as long as you're streaming, and you always chose that, there are scenarios in which you can unexpectedly stream.
That sounds like a condition.
Yeah. Wow. All right.
Oh, my.
So, for instance, suppose you are on a trip that, suppose you have it set so that new episodes come in streaming mode, so that basically you disable auto download, right? So new episodes come in and they're marked for streaming only. They're not automatically downloaded by default. Okay, so you have it set that way. You are listening to a playlist, and you've downloaded everything on the playlist anyway because you were going to go somewhere, and so you're like, well, I don't want to burn all my data when I'm on this trip, so I'm going to download everything in advance. While you are listening to something and the screen is off, a new episode comes in. It's marked for streaming by default, and it's inserted right after the thing you're listening to. So as you're listening, the episode that you're listening to ends, it starts up the next episode, which is a streaming-only episode. So it is possible for streaming to happen to you somewhat unexpectedly. It's not going to be the common case, but it is possible. So
it's like the web; it just happens to you,
right? Exactly. So you see, like there are lots of little complexities. Like a lot of people said, why don't you just pop up a dialogue asking people to approve streaming when you're on cellular, or have an option to do that? The problem is, lots of times when I have to make that decision, the display of the phone is off because it's in somebody's pocket or it's in somebody's dock somewhere in a car or in their house. And a lot of times, like if you're driving, I really shouldn't be asking people to interact with the UI. That's dangerous. So like, or you're like exercising and it's in your pocket, and there's all these situations where I have to make a decision without asking the user with a dialog box. So I think the way to do it is to just never prompt the user for this decision. You just have a setting that you can change, either on or off.
I don't know, John, what do you have to say about this?
You're going to talk about all these settings makes me think that like the key point to here is not the raw count of little toggle switches you have in your settings. I know there's sort of a combinatoric explosion of possibilities that you have to debug, so keeping the counter under control is a good first approximation of how you should keep your app from going crazy. But for the cellular stuff, setting aside the bugs, which, what can you do? Just file the radars and keep your fingers crossed. The settings that come to mind when you're describing all this functionality that I can imagine users feeling comfortable with, and the way I'm conceptualizing it is, somewhere in the settings screen, there's going to be a list of either split into Wi-Fi and cellular, or just do cellular if like Wi-Fi if you're not going to disable anything on Wi-Fi. That says, here are the things I want this app to be allowed to do on cellular. And it's a fairly long list of things. I want to say yes to that, no to that, yes to that, and you can get increasingly specific about them. You could start off with a few number. That's what, when I hear like stream and sync over cellular, I rather just see a cellular section. What am I allowed to do over cellular? Download new episodes, stream episodes that I've asked you to stream, download, stream episodes that come in while I'm listening to it. But I don't know what the options are. But it's like you can go through all the possibilities, and just because I think that's a lot of options, and it's like, who wants to answer all these questions? You're going to come up with some set of defaults that you think are appropriate for most people. But when someone goes to settings, I can imagine them going down the list and going, yes, no, no, yes. And if you want to help them, you could even put like average of X number of megabytes over the past month, which probably won't help them initially because you can't pre-populate that because you don't know what their usage is unless you collect it for everybody. But after a month of usage, they can go down that list and say, like, what's using all my cell data? And it's like, I want Overcast to... they can only guess, like, what things I don't understand. Does this take up a lot of data or not? And you can see over the past month, because you allowed us to download new episodes over cellular, it's used this amount of data, right? And then they can, just a bunch of switches going, yes, no, 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 yes, no. I feel like 6, 7, 8, 9, even 10 options in that type of thing isn't crazy, especially when you look at the actual iOS settings screens. They're just giant walls of toggle switches, and people are okay going, who can use location data? Not you, not you, not you. Like, I think that's a reasonable interaction, even though it seems really complicated. If you're going to have this complexity anyway, because you've got to have all these conditionals in the code of like, when do I do this? When do I do that? And you're going to pick defaults for them, just throw in the switches. Bury it in a section if it makes you feel better. But I think that is actually the most straightforward way. As long as you sort of organize these fleets of switches into logical groups, then people feel like they're, that each one, because like there's a topic. The topic is, I don't know how you'd phrase it, but like, this is what Overcast is allowed to do over your cell connection. Like, and when they're in that frame of mind, I feel like they're in the mode to go down those questions and just sort of, give yes or no's, rather than just going down a list of options and having to read each one and see what the topic is, what is it discussing, and what is the decision I have to make, and then go to the next one, which is entirely unrelated. What is this one talking about? What is it discussing? Whatever. I don't know. I maybe I haven't thought of all the options, but of all the ones you listed so far, I'm like, those are all reasonable things that people could conceivably want settings for, but I think there's no way to express that in a UI without just a really big, long list of options. I think when you try to combine them into a single line item, it gets confusing because it's less clear what's going on, or like people might want different options for the two things that you've combined into one or two settings.
Well, and there's more complexity to it than that. Like it isn't as simple as, do I have, combo settings, or do I have a whole bunch of settings in a big long list? Because one of the biggest problems is, if presented with a big long list, there is a cost to having that in the app, in that, like, people will see that screen, it will confuse them, and it will give them the general impression that either this app is too complex for my taste, or I don't understand this app, and therefore I don't feel good about it. And it's, people don't like to be made to feel dumb or to be confused.
Well, that's why you're burying it. You bury it in the advanced or nitpicky or whatever section. Like, I don't think anyone's going to go to the settings, period, unless the app doesn't do what they want by default. So it's all about picking the good defaults, as you discussed. I think you have a good handle on what the reasonable defaults are. You just want to have a go-to section. And when someone gets into that mode where they feel like this app is doing something that I don't... That's why I mentioned the sizes on the things, because what they really want is stop using so much of my data. And if they just see a bunch of switches, or even one or two options, even if it's just two options, like which one of those, if I change, will make it use less of my data. That's why stats on, like, because this thing has been enabled, we have downloaded this number of things over your cell connection over this period of time. So, and even if it's just two settings and two numbers, they can go, okay, well, that's the one that's using my data, so I want to turn that one off.
Right. And I probably... stats are tricky because I don't know if I can really guarantee them. Like I think it'd be hard to measure total bytes used accurately. There's things like redirects and header sizes and everything that, like, I'd have to go very low level in the APIs to be able to actually count all of those accurately. So like I don't really want to be in the game of being incredibly specific, because also there's some degree of liability there. Like, and maybe not, I'm sure legally it wouldn't cause me huge problems, but it might anger people. Like if I say something that is wrong. So if I say, for instance, like, if I have in the app a big toggle that just says all cell data off, I don't offer that because I can't guarantee that my app will use no cell data. The iOS at the system level option can. I can't, because there are things like WK WebView and a web view that tries to load images. I can't prevent that from hitting the cell network easily. Like, I can't guarantee that my app will use no data, so that's why I don't offer that option. Also, I don't show the file sizes of the podcasts before they're downloaded. A lot of people request this. The big problem with that is that it basically would require doing a head request on the file before you download it, and like right before you download it, to really get it accurately. Because there is a field in feeds where people are supposed to specify that. We do in our feed, but that is manually entered by a human being. So it is unreliable and it is often absent. So the only way to do it is to do a head request, and I can do that server side for every single thing, but that's complicated, and that's also kind of unreliable, because then what if the server, what if one of these things blocks me, then I report zeros for everything? What if my information's out of date, where like the first crawl, maybe it was just 1 megabyte because they uploaded only part of the file, and then you go to download it, 2 hours later, and it's 100 megs, and then you're angry at me because I said it was only 1 meg. There's all these like weird complex edge cases that, like, I don't want to make a promise I can't keep.
Well, you can fudge it. Like the people are saying in the chat room, low, medium, high, percentages. I'm trying to just reconceptualize this whole cellular thing from a user's perspective. What they're concerned about is, they can get the idea from the settings thing of which apps are using most of my data, like Apple provides that. But then if they find out, okay, Overcast is a big consumer of things. I subscribe to a lot of podcasts, and the settings app says it does a lot. I like podcasts. I don't want to uninstall Overcast. I want to continue to listen to them. But now I have to go into Overcast and say, how can I make Overcast use less data? And other than the big giant switch that says no cell data at all, they're going into Overcast with a mission. And the mission is figure out what little thingies I have to flip to make it use less data. And this, I'm just anything to guide them in terms of which one of these options will have the most effect, rather than relying on people reading the descriptions and understanding which one is bigger. And it can't give sizes in megabytes. Maybe you can give percentages. Maybe you give low, medium, high. I don't know. And just that's what I'm trying to think about. Like, rather than worrying about it from the people who are like super picky and want to control every aspect of your app and want to like be able to write their own code to make decisions on each decision point, most people just want to know how to make the app use less data and know what the consequences are. Like, it's here's what the option says. here's some sort of rating for if I were to turn it off, how much might I save? And then I'll make that decision and understand, because I turn that off now, I won't get that anymore if I'm on a cell network. I don't know. It is a hard problem, but I'm trying to simplify it in two ways. One, changing the way you think about it in terms of like, what is the goal? The goal is to use less data, and I feel like sizes or ratings or something like that have to be in there. And then two, the other extreme is, just introduce the topic, give a big fleet of things that can go, and then people will just go down the list and go yay or nay. And like that sync over cellular thing, I've never even seen that option. So I don't, I'm trying to think of my usage. I don't think I've ever been to the Overcast setting screens. Maybe it's because you just happen to pick the defaults that are right for me. Maybe it's because I'm always on Wi-Fi. But the people who write you in to complain about cell usage, they may be noisy, but I think most of your job is just picking good defaults. And then after that, I think you have to worry less about the intimidations of your setting screen, because I don't think many people even visit it.
Maybe. Well, and the other problem is, this is what I affectionately call the power user problem. That if you give people settings, they will use them, and then they will forget that they use them. And then the app will behave differently from the default because they changed settings, and then they forgot that they changed them. And then they will write in or complain on Twitter or complain in public that my app is not working properly because of a setting they changed. This happens all the time with the continuous playback setting, where in the playback effects pane thing, I have an option that most people would consider called continuous play, and I title it, "When this episode ends," and at the bottom I have two buttons, play next or stop. And I thought this was very clear. Many people, when they're poking around in the options, they will toggle that. Then they will forget that they toggled that. And then they will write in saying, my app used to just automatically move to the next episode, and now it doesn't. What happened? It's a bug. And every time I have to explain, and this is kind of like a, blow on the power cord kind of solution. It's like, I don't want to embarrass them in my response. So I have to be very gentle in like how I say this, but it's just a bad thing for everybody, because if you give people settings, they will use them. Many of them will forget about it or use them badly or in ways they don't understand. And then the app will break for them. And regardless of what it does to me or my reputation, it makes the app suck for them. So that's also something I want to avoid.
Aren't they happy when you gently lead them to the option? Aren't they like, oh, my problem is solved. I found a setting. I've pressed a little toggle switch, and now I feel like, I feel like it turns around on them at that point, where it's like, I thought that this app that I used to like was ruined for me forever, but really all I needed to do was tap a little toggle switch.
Yes, but a lot of times those people are not writing in. So like, this is all, these are always indicative of like, well, if these 5 people on Twitter said this happened to them and they didn't understand that that's why it happened, think of how many people there are who didn't get in touch with me, who just thought the app was broken.
Why do people like to? I don't understand why someone would turn that off while they're wandering through settings, or why they'd be wandering through settings. Again, I've also never seen this setting. I don't even know. I guess the default is to go to the next track, because I think that's what mine does.
Oh, John, you are a responsible power user. You are the power user that developers wish all power users were like. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And there are so many people who, like, if you give them a way to customize or change something, they will, and they will always demand more of those things, and then they will become support problems for you.
You know why I don't go to settings? I just launched the app just to figure out. It's because it's not a gear icon. I was like, where the hell is settings in this thing? We've been through this before. No wonder I never go to settings. It's hidden. That was one of those things. Like I said, I know.
Can I get away with not using a gear icon? And
you can. It keeps me away from the settings.
Maybe that's why. Maybe regular people are so confused by everything because everything is horrible that they'll push anything and not think about it. Power users look for a gear. And they don't see a gear, they just assume, well, I guess there's no settings. So that's perfect. Maybe I should make all my icons make less sense.
Have it squirm out of the way when you try to tap it.
Wasn't that a thing?
Yeah, like on Windows.
Yeah, you can't do proximity detection with the...
Yeah.
Wait for the iPad that has a stylus support, then you'll have proximity detection.
Yeah, for all my iPad users. Yeah.
Totally. Hey, I'm one of them. So before we leave
like
this
less
topic,
than 5%.
Well, before we leave this topic, maybe mention this and I blanked, but why not just have one universal? Can I do this? Can I do anything on cellular? Yes or no?
Because I can't enforce that. Basically, because like that's why, like I said earlier, like if like a web view for show notes loads an image, you know, like there's stuff that is very hard to enforce. Like,
well, you could rephrase it. You know, can I download any podcast related materials over cell? Well, that's okay. That's still a little weak, but you know what I'm driving at. Like, you could wordsmith it to get the wording right. Do you just think that's not granular enough for your average user?
Well, I think, you know, people either want the app to literally use 0, in which case they have to use the iOS system toggle, which they probably already have without even looking in the app, because most apps don't have these options. Most apps just do it, and, you know, it's up to you as the user to minimize the usage or to go in settings and disable it. So if somebody wants to literally use no data, they will use the system pane for that. I think some data for, you know, because every app that syncs with the web or you know, gets status or info from the web, like you're losing, you know, a few hundred kilobytes here and there to all these apps, and, you know, you just have to not care about that level of usage if you're going to have cell data enabled for anything. So like some data usage is fine, but again, I don't want to make a promise that I can't really keep, and especially with something like this where like making a mistake here could cost people money.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. It's a tough thing for sure. But before we move on to start the show with follow-up, you should probably tell us about something that's cool.
I agree. So this week, we have back long-term sponsor, lynda.com, lynda.com. Lynda.com is an easy and affordable way to help you learn with high-quality, easy-to-follow video tutorials. You can instantly stream thousands of courses created by experts on software, web development, graphic design, and more. Go to lynda.com/ATP. That's lynda.com/ATP to see for yourself. Lynda.com has fresh new courses added all the time. They work directly with the industry experts and software companies to provide timely training, often the same day new versions or releases hit the market, so you can always be up to speed. If you're a developer, they have programming languages, they have different skills, media production, they have so much stuff, and they have all these courses that are offered at all experience levels, whether you're beginner or advanced. These courses are offered at the highest quality. This is not like, you know, the homemade YouTube videos, which can be very inconsistent in their quality level, and it can be pretty hard to find good stuff. Every lynda.com course is very high quality and just high production value, everything. Courses are also broken up into bite-sized pieces so you can learn at your own pace and learn from start to finish, or just find a quick answer. You have all these choices. They have like little transcripts on the side. You can scan through the transcript. You can search. You can jump right to the point they're talking about when you find something. It's really an incredibly advanced platform with very well produced videos. So you can even learn while you're on the go with lynda.com apps for iPhone, iPad, and Android. And you can, you know, the great thing about Lynda to me is that you can watch whenever you want with no pressure or commitment, because you don't pay per video. You pay one low monthly price of just $25. This gives you unlimited access to over 100,000 video tutorials. I learned things like, for example, editing this podcast. My podcast editing skills improved dramatically when I watched the videos on Logic and on level compression and EQing voice. Really great courses here on lynda.com. So they also offer an annual premium plan. If you want to download courses for offline viewing or download sample projects and practice along with the instructor, really great stuff here. Again, they have programming, they have management skills, creative apps like Adobe's Creative Suite, Logic, Final Cut, negotiation skills, all sorts of great courses that almost everybody can find something here that they would like. So anyway, lynda.com is offering a 10-day free trial to access all courses for free if you visit lynda.com/ATP. Once again, that is a 10-day free trial with access to all courses. lynda.com/ATP. Thanks a lot to lynda.com for sponsoring our show once again. Highly recommended.
All right. So now that we're, 30, 40 minutes in, let's do some follow-up.
See what you've done here with this pre-follow-up? You've just broken the show. Not a complicated format.
No.
It's fairly straightforward.
All those years of follow-up ruined.
Just like that. Just like that. I'm sorry. Some men just like to see the world burn.
Yeah, it's true.
That's a reference, John. Except I think that's actually Watch the World Burn, but that's okay.
Is this like Nero or?
Marco just learned about the cowbell SNL skit today, so he's coming down from
so bad.
This is how this went. I want to defend myself here. Tiff said she made like the cowbell fever joke, and I knew there was a joke about more cowbell, and I wasn't quite sure where it was from, so I said, "Oh, is that from Spinal Tap?" And it turns out no, but I at least knew that the joke was about having more cowbell in that Blue Oyster Cult, whatever song that is. The
thing is that it's something that you heard about but didn't know like the original of.
That's correct.
That's what we're getting at. It's not whether you get references, is that you haven't actually experienced the original piece of media from pop culture.
I can't believe you didn't recognize that quote from Dark Knight. Now I know how John feels with me.
You know, I've seen that.
So good. It's one of my favorite movies. Oh, God. Anyway, so we should probably correct our incorrect statements about Half-Life for like the third week in a row.
Half-Life just keeps coming. It's the real one is out for the Mac. Has been for a long time. Not just the source port, but the plain old, cruddy-looking original Half-Life. So Half-Life is completely and fully available for the Mac.
I can't believe this game came out when I was like 16 and we're talking about it still.
Kind of like Halo, also completely available for the Mac. Too little, too late.
Wait, what? The original Halo is on...
That's where I played the original Halo. I played it on the Mac.
What? I genuinely did not know that. I assumed it was always Xbox only.
Oh, thank God. Now everyone's going to email you.
I know.
Because I knew there was like a history where like Bungie was making it for the Mac, and then Microsoft bought them, and then they canned it, right?
Yeah, I guess you guys weren't in Apple circles when the Halo trailer was shown at Macworld or whatever that was.
No.
Was it Macworld? Yeah, I guess it had to have been a Macworld. Anyway, on stage. Look at this amazing new game coming for the Mac. I don't want to talk about it.
It hurts too much to talk about.
It's dark time. Yeah. All right. So thank you, Christian, for that correction. This is from Hunter. I mentioned last week about on-demand resources, where if your app doesn't come with a bunch of stuff, it can download them on demand, and you can sort of spec that out when you build your application, which resources won't be bundled with the application but can be downloaded by the application at any point. And I mentioned that it didn't seem like there was enough UI hooks to give a good user experience. The Hunter says that the on-demand resource API does support NS Progress for tracking progress and displaying it to the user. So that's nice, although you think you have it bad. Think about games that have like 500 meg levels that download levels over cellular. Yes, no. What's the right answer there? Probably no, but then if they're playing a game in a car ride and they get to the next level, the only thing you can really do is say, sorry, you can't play the next level because you have cellular downloads, blah, 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 blah. And the kid immediately goes in, changes the setting, turns it on, and uses all of his parents' data. Or just waits a really long time for the next half an hour in the car for a 500 meg level to download while he travels along the highway. Anyway.
Right. Or any game that uses it gets so many one-star reviews from people having this problem that it stops using it.
Yeah. But I think it's still a good option. You just got to break it up into smaller chunks, you know? Like, instead of, hopefully no level is 500 megs, but if games are like 3 gigs and they have a small number of levels, each one's got to be pretty big. Anyway, I hope game developers figured this out. I kind of like the PS4 thing where if you download a game, you can start playing it before the game is entirely downloading because they just download the early parts of the game sooner. Still takes a long time to download, but it's nice that you don't have to wait for the whole thing to download because you're not going to outrun it by playing. Like some of these games take a certain minimum amount of time to get through, especially when you're playing for the first time. They just let you start playing as soon as you've got like the first, hours worth of levels or something. And by the time you grind through those, even if you're an expert in the game, the rest will be downloaded, or so they hope.
Yeah, I don't see this working out.
We'll see. Someone's going to implement it.
I do think it's interesting also that like there seems on the iOS App Store, there seems to be no correlation between game size and commercial success.
Okay.
Think about it. Man, you guys are off tonight. Or either everyone else is crazy or I am. All right, so keep going.
You expect there to be? Like, you expected big games to be more successful?
Yeah, I'm kind of saying, like, maybe it's not worth making games so big.
Well, it really depends on the type of game. Like, if you're making a puzzle game, how big could it possibly be, right? I mean, how talk about having no assets. How big is letterpress? I don't know if there's any graphics in that entire game.
There's just, like, the launch icon. That's it.
Right. But other types of games, like if you're making a 3D game, there's going to be geometry, there's going to be textures, and, like, there's no getting around that. And it's going to be much bigger than a game with a static screen. I don't know. I don't think people have the same expectations of mobile games, but I think genre plays into how big things are. And art style. If you do things with texture mapping, textures take up room. If you do everything with flat shading, you just have geometry then, I don't know. I think it's reasonable on a small platform like this.
Desert golfing ought to be enough for anybody.
Yeah.
You love that game so much.
It's really good.
I haven't played that since the Alto came out, I realized. I still have it installed, but I'm stuck at whatever.
Yeah, me too.
I'm not stuck. If I played it, I would continue, but it's not making progress. But I do not install it because I'm afraid that if I delete it, I'll lose all my progress. I don't know if that's actually true, but I'm afraid it is.
Yeah, I've never played it, and I'm pretty happy about that.
Get Alto's Adventure. It's a better game.
I have it. I've had it for weeks. Still never played it.
Disagree.
You don't think Alto's Adventure is better than Desert Golfing?
I think everyone else thinks it is, but I don't think it is.
Oh my god. This is like you as a gamer in a nutshell.
No, I mean,
it's too much like a game. I don't like that gaming game part. Can you just put me in a desert with a ball? That's all I can handle.
No, I mean, they're both good games. I would say they're both excellent games, but I got a lot more time out of Desert Golfing, just because of like the kind of like Zen commentary qualities I got out of it, where Alto is a great game, but once I played it like on one plane flight, and then I was like, all right, well, every time I play this game, it's basically the same thing over and over again. And I know Desert Golfing is similar, but for whatever reason, I didn't get any depth out of Alto. So like it was cool for like the one day I was playing it a lot, but then I tried playing it here and there afterwards, and I just it just felt too repetitive to me.
You don't have any competitive juices flowing. With Alto is all about either competing with yourself, trying to best your previous best run, or competing with other people, whereas there's no competitive aspect in Desert Golfing, really.
That's what makes Desert Golfing so great, is that it really shows you how pointless everything else in the universe is.
This is a man whose wife plays all console games in hard mode, by the way.
Yes.
Could not be more different.
That's correct. Yeah, no, she is the gamer. I am totally not. She's playing Prison Architect now, thanks to CGP Grey.
That sounds awful. Like, it just sounds like work to me.
I mean, it's like Theme Hospital. You know, like it's one of those kind of games. Like, you know, it's basically Sim Prison. If I was like more of a gamer right now, I would probably play it too, because it looks pretty cool. I just don't. I can't. You know, like I'm doing great with work stuff with Overcast and with the show and everything else, and I'm like, the last thing I want to do is take time playing games. Like I don't. Whenever the opportunity comes up to spend time doing something, I'd rather work than play games. And
can you tell everybody exactly what level you're on in Desert Golfing, just so they can add some context to your previous statement?
Yeah, give me a sec, because it's been a while since I played it, so I gotta dig it up.
The man who doesn't want to spend too much time playing games. Go ahead. What level?
3054.
All right.
Yeah, and I've been stuck on this one for a long time.
That's 3054 holes, people.
Yeah, I think we've solved that. I don't know. I haven't seen Prison Architect, and so clearly I'm unqualified to talk about it. With that said, let me talk about it. It sounds like so much work, and I stopped doing work like that at Sim Tower. Like, Sim Tower is when I pretty much stopped doing work for games. I remember vividly trying World of Warcraft when it was relatively new, and all I did was run around killing like boars or something like that. And I lasted 2 hours before I decided I'm just doing work. This isn't a game. This is just me doing work.
Prison Architect is more like Transport Tycoon than WoW. I mean,
yeah, it's more like the building sim games. But even I love Transport Tycoon. I haven't played it in probably 5 years.
Oh yeah, I haven't played it in more than that.
Right, because like an OpenTTD is awesome. Like it was such a fantastic re-implementation of the game engine, and added so much stuff, and it's fantastic. I lost a lot of time to it, like, you know, in 2007 or 2008 kind of era. But again, I had like, there's never a time when I want to spend hours and hours and hours playing games instead of producing something that I want to be working on. And that's just me. That's just like, it's what motivates me right now. And maybe that'll change over time. I'm sure it'll be different once my kid's old enough to enjoy games, and I want to do it with him. But for now, I just don't care about games.
Over 3,000 holes, people. Over 3,000. Doesn't want to spend a lot of time playing games. He'd much rather be doing something else.
That was almost a meditation for me. Mm-hmm. Like Desert Golfing,
yeah,
was...
You're lucky that game does not have a count of hours played inside it.
No, it doesn't. But I mean, I know it took like 8,000 strokes. I mean, that kind of you kind of figure some idea, like, you know, well, if each one takes a few seconds or whatever, then... But, you know, so obviously I know I spend a lot of time there, but how much time do I spend on Twitter? It's way more than that.
All right, what do you have to show for that? There's no hole count on Twitter. We don't even know. There's no background color change. No nothing. No rocks. Not a cactus in sight.
My God.
I don't even know what kind of things you're seeing at whole 3,000.
This show has been I had no idea when we started before follow-up, doing things before follow-up, that would really take this entire show right off the rails.
I had an idea.
I love you, John.
Our second sponsor this week is Hover. Hover is the best way to buy and manage domain names. Go to hover.com and use promo code PASSINGLANE for 10% off your first purchase. I'm so sorry, Casey.
Hey, buddy.
When you have a great idea, you want a great domain name that's catchy and memorable. Hover gives you exactly what you need to find the perfect domain for your idea so you can get started actually working on it. Hover gives you easy-to-use, powerful tools to buy and manage domains so anyone can do it, advanced or beginner. And they're known for their incredible support. Not only do they have email options and stuff, but they also have no wait, no hold, no transfer phone service. So you can call them up, and a real-live human being will pick up the phone. Not after a big hold time. They won't transfer you to a million different departments to figure out who can help you. No. You call, and a human being picks up the phone, and they can help you. If you've ever registered a domain name anywhere else, you know that this can be a tricky business. At best, you get a place that means well, but their site is really clunky and hard to use and ugly, and the control panel is really clunky. At worst, it can feel like you're being scammed by a lot of these registrars. It can be pretty bad. It can feel like you're being tricked into buying upsells and cross promotions and stuff that just doesn't make you feel good about them. Hover is above all of that. Hover is... They respect you. They respect you as a user. They respect your time, and they have really good design and really easy usability, so that they don't try to upsell you with crazy stuff or try to trick you into buying extras. They include anything that should be included for free. They include for free things like WHOIS privacy, DNS. They have all sorts of stuff they just include right there for free. The control panel is the best domain control panel I've ever used, and I've used now. Throughout my past life when I had a real job and through all my personal stuff, I've used probably 10 different registrars' control panels at least over the years, and Hover's is by far the best, the nicest, the easiest to use. It's not even close. If you, like me, have had domains in other places and you want to transfer them into Hover, they will even, if you want to, they will take your old registrar's login info and do the transfer for you. They call this Valid Transfer Service. I don't know anyone else who offers this. And so that way they'll move over everything without making a mistake, like DNS entries, stuff like that that's kind of tricky to get right and has pretty big ramifications if you mess anything up. They will do it all for you if you want them to, so you don't have to worry about the stress of moving. And even just annoyances like dealing with the transfer codes and the unlocks and all that crap. They will deal with it all for you if you let them. So it's great. They also have email features, just $20 a year if you want a fully functional email account on a domain with 10 gigs of storage. $29 a year gets you a terabyte of storage. And then if you want just email forwarding, let's say you already have email hosting, you just want a domain that can receive email at that domain, just $5 a year. So you can keep using the host you already have if you want that. So great options here. Go to hover.com. hover.com for people who don't understand the word I'm saying. Go to hover.com and use promo code PASSINGLANE this week. That is PASSINGLANE, one word, for 10% off your first purchase. Thanks a lot to Hover for sponsoring our show.
A little bit more follow-up. John, tell us about Satya Nadella.
No, I'm saving it for next week. We're moving on.
Good call. All right, we're done with follow-up.
Really?
This show's out of control.
We're almost an hour in.
Really? Only an hour in and we're done with follow-up? Boy, I wonder what made that take so long.
It must be too much follow-up.
Yeah.
Oh, God. I'm staying out of this. Okay, so are we talking about the end of TikTok, or is that also not for right now?
Oh, I think that's a good one. Oh, yeah, I don't know why that has that prefix on it. I'll fix it.
So this says in the show notes, next week, end of TikTok, which kind of makes it sound like TikTok is ending next week.
It could be.
All right, so what is...
This is the end of the computer age. Oh, I messed that up too. Damn it. It was welcome to the end. Oh.
We might as well just stop the show now because we're all out of control.
Welcome to the end of the computer age.
John, try to bring us back, if you please, and tell us about TikTok and why it's ending.
Oh, no, the one part I didn't put in the show notes is the part I always forget, so I'm going to wing it. Intel has this strategy that they call tick-tock, where they make a new microarchitecture, and then the next round of chips that they offer for sale is... I screwed it up already.
Since 2007, Intel has been operating on a staggered release schedule that alternates manufacturing process shrinks, ticks, with major microarchitectural changes, tocks.
Yeah, but you don't help me know which is the which. Sometimes they just do a shrink.
That would be a tick.
And sometimes they change the microarchitecture.
That's a tock.
All right, there you have it.
How am I the voice of reason between the three of us? What is going on?
I can never... They picked a bad naming scheme. Yeah, the point is they alternate. And so this has been sort of regular schedule. What it meant was that every other round of chips, you would get a new process size. So you'd have 32 nanometer chips, another set of 32 nanometer chips, and then you'd go to the next size smaller, which I think was 28, or they skipped to 22. Anyway, we've had 14 nanometer chips for 2 generations now. And so, in theory, the next round of chips should be on their next process size, which is supposed to be 10. But Intel has basically said the next round of chips will not be 10 nanometer. There'll be a third round of 14 nanometer chips, basically because their 10 nanometer manufacturing process is not ready yet. So,
well, and also it's worth pointing out that the 14 nanometer process is just barely coming online now. Like it was also like that. What everyone was saying was the Broadwell delay. Much of that, or maybe all of that, I don't know, much of that was the process, the 14 nanometer process being so delayed. And so they had a huge delay just trying to get this out. It was about a year late or a year and a half late, right?
Yeah, and so this is like getting out ahead of the next one by saying we're not going to do what we did, but be like, oh, we're kind of on schedule, but things are kind of late and they'll come out or whatever. It's like, look, it's just 10 nanometers is not going to be ready. But we're also not going to, delay having a new line of chips. We are going to make one more round of chips on 14 nanometers. And they had to come up with a new name for them, apparently doing the names of these things. It was going to be Skylake, and then it was going to be followed by Cannon Lake. So in between them, the third line of 14 nanometer things is going to be Kaby Lake. Anyone want to take a swing at that?
KB?
It's pronounced hover.
Yeah. Cabby. I don't know. I'm sure it's probably KB. Anyway, that's what they're going to call the third round of 14 nanometer chips, which is pretty weird. As we've discussed on previous shows, Moore's Law can't continue forever because as far as modern science knows, there is a minimum size that things can be. We're always trying to smash them up into smaller and smaller pieces to find out what can be smaller, but the rules of physics change in crazy ways when you get really small, so we were not going to double the number of things we can fit in a unit of space every 18 months forever and ever. This does not mean the end of Moore's Law. It just definitely means to slow down. I think I'm fine with that. I like the fact that Intel is owning up to this rather than just saying, oh, it might be a little bit late, because then it just, they're going to end up shifting a whole year over. And I'm glad that they're going to do another round of 14 nanometer chips rather than just delaying forever and ever until 10 nanometers is ready. So,
well, but I mean, they basically did that with Haswell.
I know, and it was bad, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm using one now. Like right now, if you've bought a Mac in the last couple of years, you've gotten Haswell, unless you bought one of the 2015 revisions of only the Retina MacBook 13, the MacBook Air, or the MacBook One. The 15 still using Haswell. The iMac is still using Haswell. The Mac Pro is using the Pentium Pro. I mean, it's like everything is delayed and old because this one was so delayed. Like getting to 14 was so delayed. And so what Intel did in the last year and a half, while Broadwell was being delayed, they released a kind of like 1.5 version of Haswell. It's the same core, but they just gave us higher binned, higher clocked parts just to kind of tide us over and tide over their partners like Apple, who are trying to sell computers around these things and trying to make product decisions around these things. That's why I'm using a 4 gigahertz computer right now because Haswell didn't start out at 4 gigahertz, and I'm sure Apple's margins on the 4 gigahertz chips are not that great because of the various binning and yield issues that are typical of the business. But they had to give us some kind of minor increase. All right, take what we have, raise the clocks as much as we can without shrinking the process, and we'll do something. We'll give people something new to tide them over while we work out our next revision's delays. So they already did a third revision kind of with Haswell. So what they're basically saying here is that this is going to happen again. This time we're just warning you in advance.
And they're giving it a new name, and I don't think much is known about this new line of chips. Like, will it just be, like you said, just, the higher binned versions of the other things with maybe a couple of little errors fixing them or something? Or will it be, will they bump the GPU for, like, will this actually be a significant new line of chips? It seems like that by giving it a new name, a new lake name, that it's not just going to be like a 1.5, but it's certainly not going to be a new architecture, a TOC, right, guys? It's not going to be a new architecture, I guess. They're saving that for, I don't know. It's confusing. Although, like, the relationship between Intel's roadmap and what Apple releases, in some ways, it seems like it's tied tightly together, where you're like, oh, the Apple can't release the machines because Intel doesn't have the chips ready. But in other respects, they're totally unrelated. See the Mac Pro.
Well, no, that's not entirely true. The Mac Pro is very related, but it's related to the Xeon roadmap.
I know, but aren't they already behind an entire year on Xeon chips?
They are, but the last revision of Xeons was a little bit questionable. The problem that I saw when looking at what you would do with the Haswell chips, on the Xeons, Intel sells most of these things in servers. And the server business is very different from the desktop workstation business that the Mac Pro sits in. And on servers, what you generally want, what the market demands, is more and more cores, even if each core isn't as fast. And so that's why you have most of the Xeon lineup, the ones, at least the high ones that sell nicely and have nice profit margins, and have all the PCI Express lanes and everything. Most of those optimize for core count and have a clock speed of like 2 gigahertz. So you're getting like relatively low clock speeds, very high core counts. The Mac Pro, it uses a very small number of these chips. It offers 3 or 4 of them, and they're like the highest clocked versions they can get at each core count, basically, without blowing the thermals, it seems. When they moved from the previous ones, which was Sandy Bridge EP, I think, into Haswell EP, when Haswell EP came out, sorry, this is the generation that they've skipped. There really was not much of a gain to be had in the areas that the Mac Pro actually sells chips from. Like in those parts, it really was. It was like the core counts went up slightly. Like you could get like a 10 core and like a 14 core and stuff like there was like a small core count upgrade, but like all the clock speeds went down or stayed the same, and power was a little bit weird. So it was not a great update, and so that might have been why Apple seemingly hasn't and seemingly won't use those. I don't know, but it also, the Mac Pro also has skipped generations before. This won't be the first time. And so it might also just be partly that it wasn't a major upgrade from Intel, and partly Apple doesn't care that strongly about upgrading these on a frequent basis. I don't know.
Back in the good old days, when a new chip came out, everybody put it in their machines because you had to, because there was competitive pressure to. And for the most part, that was a pretty good thing. Even if these were not a big upgrade over the old ones, especially on a thing like the Mac Pro. Like, oh, more cores, who cares? But like, isn't that what people are buying this for? Like the super parallel test where 2 extra cores would be a significant difference, right? Like, of all the machines that are actually going to care that you have, 12 versus 10 cores, the Mac Pro is the one. The tips are saying that they didn't have any good GPU options, so they would have had to bump the CPU without the GPU. But anyway, Apple historically has not liked to play that game, and they're like, well, unless we have an impressive new machine, we're not just going to give you new CPUs. Except, I guess, in the laptops where they'll do that with the Haswell 1.5s. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I mean I don't know if they've ever skipped a major laptop CPU generation until now, where they appear to be skipping the quad core Broadwells. And going right to Skylake. But this is a weird situation with the timing of those things. I don't think they've ever skipped one before that.
So what does this mean if hypothetically you have 2 copies of, I think it's a late 2011 high-res anti-glare 15-inch MacBook Pro, and there's not one Retina Mac in your entire household, and you're thinking you're going to hold on for the next major MacBook Pro revision, or, well, I shouldn't say major, but, the next big chipset. Last I heard, that was theoretically coming this fall. Does any of this change that?
No, because what they're saying is that the generation of chips that we're moving into, the 14 nanometer, like this is what started with Broadwell this past spring with the MacBook One, and then the Airs, and then later on the 13. that generation is the 14 nanometer ones, and that's like we are just in the infancy of that.
And we're going to be at 14 for a while, is what they're saying.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they're saying.
14, which is fine because Skylake is apparently a big deal. Get some nice power savings. I don't think it's the end of the world, and it's not. If you are waiting for a new line of Macs to buy when the Skylake Macs come out, they ought to be pretty nice machines. So that's not a big deal. It's just the next year and the year after. I don't know what the strategy is for. I mean, if it's just going to be 3 years of 14 nanometer chips. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've had 2.5 years of Haswell's, and it hasn't been great. Like we've been kind of stalled at performance for a long time, but they're still good chips. I mean, like this iMac, this 4 gigahertz 4-core iMac that I have is amazing. Like it is by far the best computer I've ever owned, and not by far, it's one of the fastest. I did briefly have the 6-core cylinder Mac Pro, and that was faster in parallel tasks, but this actually beats it in single-threaded, which is another problem the Xeon line has, that the consumer desktop chips, because they are newer in their core revision, usually beat the Mac Pro Xeons in single-threaded tasks, which is embarrassing for the Mac Pro. Anyway, I don't think this is going to be that bad of a thing. I think it's going to be really just a continuation of what we've seen for the last few years. Just now they're just making it official. Now they're admitting up front and warning us up front, okay, this is what's going to happen again, and we'll see what we can do about it.
On a final note, I should point out, lest my father, the ex-IBMer, give me hell about it, that IBM is actually at 7 nanometers. Is that right? But
not really. They're just demoing. It's like a tech demo. Like, look what we can do in the lab when cost is no object.
Try shipping millions of those things every quarter. Yeah,
I agree. But I just wanted to point it out because obviously other people are making progress in this arena. But just like you both said, I mean, that's not producing millions of them. That's making one in a lab.
At great expense with very exotic materials. Was that what element are they using? Expensive stuff.
In summary, it's going to be expensive.
Well, no, it's the same. Like I remember back in the PowerPC days, they had similar type of things. Companies that would say, we can make a chip at amazing speeds. It was probably like 1 gigahertz or 2 gigahertz back then. But it was like, we were at like 300 megahertz. Like, wow, how can you make something that fast? We use these exotic materials, and you could do lots of things for enough money, right? But you can't, if it's going to cost $10,000 per chip or whatever, that doesn't make a difference. It's not viable. You have to make it into something that could be manufactured cheaply, and then you've got something. That's Intel's whole thing. Like, they're going to do a shrink, and suddenly the cost of all their chips aren't going to triple.
The first computer magazine issue I ever bought from a newsstand had a cover that was advertising 100 megahertz. Because this was a big deal in 1993 or something. And it was a DEC Alpha chip that had been announced that could hit 100 megahertz. And I was very disappointed to learn that.
I vividly remember having a really intense argument with I think he's a second cousin of mine, I don't know, a relative of mine, who was in college at the time, and I was in like middle school or something like that. And he had, if memory serves, I want to say it was like a gigabyte of storage across probably like 6 hard drives, because it was that long ago. And I remember arguing with him, there is no possible way a human being could use a gigabyte of storage. It's just not possible. What could you possibly put over a gigabyte of storage?
Because back then you were storing like, pages or like Word documents. It wasn't like anything big. It was like,
you didn't have like these podcast apps downloading his audio and leaving their temp files around in your disks.
Well done. But yeah, it's wild how things change. In any case, why don't you tell us about one last thing that's awesome, and then we have one more thing to talk about.
Our final sponsor this week is MailRoute. Once again, MailRoute. Go to mailroute.net/ATP. You've heard from me over the years that I don't use Gmail. I use regular IMAP hosts because I don't like proprietary email systems, and I don't like webmail, and I just want something that will work with regular mail apps that I can get them anywhere on any platform, and I don't have to be tied to somebody's web interface I don't like, or somebody's terrible IMAP gateway, Gmail. So anyway, and one of the problems when you try to host mail somewhere other than Gmail, somewhere else, or you try to host it yourself, if you're on your own server, or if you have a business and you have to administer their email server, one of the big problems with doing this is spam filtering. Spam filtering is so complex these days. It's so advanced that really doing it right requires like a dedicated service that specializes in that, and like a cloud service that can combine wisdom from all sorts of things and not just be like one installation. Like a simple Bayesian filter is not enough these days. So MailRoute is a professional spam and virus filtering service. So what you do is you point your domain MX record at them. So they become your official email host to the world. Then you give them the address of your real MX record, your real server, and so they act as a proxy, as a middleman between the internet and you, and they shield you from all the crap people try to send you that's spam and viruses. I admit, when I first heard about it, I was skeptical. I thought, how well could it really work compared to like the customizable spam filtering and stuff that Fastmail had that I'd been using for years before that. And it works so well that I when I was using other things, I would still get spam. I'd get maybe 3 to 5 spam messages a day, and I thought that was about as good as it can get, really. And then I switched to MailRoute. I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, something like that. It is so good that I had received one spam message one day last week, and that was noteworthy because I just hadn't seen one in weeks or months. Like, MailRoute is so good, you literally go from whatever amount of spam you're getting, you go to 0 most of the time. Like, it becomes a very rare occurrence to see spam actually get delivered into your inbox. It is that good. And it isn't so aggressive that they're constantly throwing away legitimate mail either. Anything that's kind of on the border where they're not quite sure if it's spam, they put in the quarantine section for like a week or two or something, and then they email you a summary of just the subject lines of those things, and you can just give a quick little glance down that list every day or every week or whatever, and you can see, all right, you know what, that one, that was legitimate, let that through. All the rest of these, forget about it. Those are all spam. So it's very, very easy to make sure you don't have false positives for too long, and to train it not to do that anymore for whatever slightly spammy things that you get emails for. But the spam filtering is just shockingly good. It is so good. I don't think I will ever go without it now. It is. I can very, very highly recommend it. Over the years, I've recommended people go to IMAP posts. I've recommended Fastmail a lot specifically. I will say now, I very, very highly recommend putting MailRoute in front of your IMAP post. It is really good. And from what I hear from Gmail people, it sounds like it's actually better than Gmail spam filtering. And I know a lot of Gmail people think it can't get better, but like if you're ever seeing spam, it can get better. That's basically it. So MailRoute really is amazing. I very highly recommend MailRoute. If you have your own domain name, or if you host email, or if you have your own IMAP post, put MailRoute in front of your mail. Trust me, it is that good. They're not paying me to say that. They're paying me to say this other script that I'm mostly ignoring because I'm telling you something better, which is I use it and I love it, and I can tell you firsthand it works for me. Nobody can buy me saying that. I'm telling you that because it's true. Anyway, back to their script. Go to mailroute.net/ATP for a free trial, and if you use that link, mailroute.net/ATP, you will also get 10% off for the lifetime of your account. Not 10% off for your first purchase, not 10% off once, 10% off for the lifetime of your account. That is awesome. Thanks a lot to MailRoute. mailroute.net/ATP.
So lately, there's been a humongous kerfuffle with Reddit. I have to admit, I don't really ever use Reddit. I think I may have mentioned in a show on the show in the past. I don't know if it ever made it to the final version, but the only time I ever really used Reddit was when I needed to acquire things after one of my favorite websites got shut down. And I used Reddit here and there for that. But I don't use it for discussions. I don't use it for really anything else. And I guess there was there was a lot of agita with regard to their now ex-CEO, Ellen Pao. Is that right? Did I get that right?
I believe so.
And I can't pass judgment as to whether or not she was good at her job because I don't really use Reddit. But it seemed like a lot of people came out of the woodwork to try to get her out of the CEO position. And it seemed like, from an outsider's perspective, the whole of Reddit tried to kind of hoist her out of the chair, if you will. And the only real concrete information I've gotten about this is from Hello Internet. And I just listened, I think it was today actually, to their latest episode, and we'll have a link in the show notes, where they talk about this. And CGP Grey seems to be a pretty big Reddit user and a pretty big Reddit fan, whereas Brady Hare and the other host seems to have a much more similar perspective to myself, or I should say I have a more similar perspective to him, in that it all seems really gross to me from the outside. And it all seems like a kind of crummy corner of the internet, but I'm probably judging unfairly because I'm only hearing about the crummiest parts of this corner of the internet. So I don't know. John, do you use Reddit at all? Do you have any thoughts on this?
I do. I think it's worth explaining what Reddit is, broadly speaking, because if people don't use it, like, I don't think the name tells you anything about it. You could get confused about what the heck goes on there. It is, in the grand scheme of things, it's a website where people go to have little communities. You make a subreddit about whatever topic you're interested in talking about, and there people can share links with each other, and they can comment on the links, and they can also vote on each other's comments. That's basically what it boils down to. You've probably heard of lots of sites about like this, where you can make a little sub community. You have an account. You can share information with each other and links and comments, and then the things that you share, other people can comment on, and then everyone gets to vote on the things that you say. And it seems like, all right, well, whatever. But we've had web bulletin boards, we had Dig and Hacker News, and like a million other sites that are like this. Reddit is one of those sites. It was one of the ones that it kind of caught on. It's very large, very popular. There are subreddits for everything you could possibly imagine, from technologies to cats to alligators to knitting to everything you can imagine. It seems like, everything's like whatever. It's like Condé Nast owns them now. I'm not sure if they've ever made money. They have difficult trying to come up with a monetization pattern, but they get a tremendous amount of traffic, and it's a place where people go. Everything else about it, like, is sort of problems of their own making, because setting aside how do you make money, like we talk about that to death, like, okay, you got a lot of traffic, you got a lot of users, you got a lot of eyeballs or whatever, figure out how to monetize them, stuff like that. The decision Reddit was faced with is a decision that many sites that are very popular are faced with, and almost every site I can think of off the top of my head makes better decisions about this, which is, since anyone can come and make an account, and anyone can make a little subgroup or whatever about whatever topic they want, do you have some kind of policy, terms and conditions, code of conduct, something saying what are you allowed to do and say, and what kind of groups are you allowed to have on this site? And I for the life of me, I can't think of another website that doesn't have something like that. Certainly Twitter does, and Twitter, we always complain about the harassment on Twitter and stuff like that. At least they have a policy, right? Reddit's big thing was like, no man, free speech, anybody can come here and make a subreddit about anything, and like, we should be allowed to say what, like, anytime when someone brings up free speech on the internet, I don't think I've seen an example of it being correct. Maybe it's because I don't hang out on constitutional law boards. Maybe that's the place where it's correct. What people really mean is, I'm allowed to say whatever I want on someone else's website because free speech, right? So Reddit, the people who run Reddit, fancy themselves as like, we're not just a website, we are the internet, and we are completely neutral, and even though we're a privately held company that pays money to someone to run our servers and pays employees to write the software for them and does all this stuff, really, we are just a giant level playing field for everybody to come and do it. And therefore, we don't want to have pretty much any controls over what you're allowed to do, what you're allowed to say, what kind of groups you're allowed to have. Everything is welcome, all people, all ideas, all behavior, as long as I guess you don't hack us and destroy our servers or something like that, because that would be bad. But anything beyond that, like if you're just using our site, if you are typing words into a box and clicking buttons, anything you do is A-OK with us. And a lot of the controversy with the new CEO came in because she decided that some things are not okay. They were going to have some sort of barriers and rules about, well, you can't just type any words you want into this box. You can't have communities surrounding anything you want, because we don't want those type of people using our website. We don't want them to be part of our quote-unquote community. And like you were saying, Casey, like, it seems like an icky place or whatever. There is no Reddit community. Reddit is gigantic. Reddit has people who are just obsessed with cute cat pictures, right? And then Reddit has people who are just, showing, pictures of fat people to make fun of them or whatever, or like racist bulletin boards, or, like every possible vile idea you can imagine. The whole idea is like, this is a place where we can go and we're allowed to use these people's website and put our information in their database servers and send requests to their web servers, and it's all free speech, man, and we can do whatever we want. And Reddit trying to add some kind of controls of like, okay, well, there's certain things we don't want to be on something.reddit.com. Like there's certain things we don't want. So if you want to do that, go someplace else and do it. The Reddit community, such as it is, like the people who believe in free speech, are like, you can't stop us from putting words into your servers. That's our birthright. Reddit is about free speech. And it's just so depressing to me to see. And by the way, they're backsliding on that now. They're like, oh, that CEO is gone, and the new person in here, I don't know all the backstory of this, but the new person is actually one of the early people on Reddit. Is like, actually, we want you allowed to do anything you want, except for these very few things that we narrowly define as being bad. I don't understand what the sort of the mental barrier here is to the people who are running the site to putting their foot down and saying, this is okay, and this is not. They somehow feel like by doing that, they're crushing freedom under their jackboot. Like, you just run reddit.com. It's a website on the internet where people type words into boxes and put them into database servers that you run. Like, that doesn't define free speech. So I find it incredibly frustrating to see like all this posturing and all this anger all so misdirected. And the only thing I put in the show notes about this is 2 tweets from Lori Voss, who I think sum up this entire thing. She says, the tragedy of all online community spaces is that the goals of inclusive and safe are at the extreme mutually exclusive goals. So what she's saying is like, do you want to have a place where everybody is welcome? Oh, we are an inclusive site. Anyone can come to Reddit. Anyone can make a subreddit. Like, it's good to be inclusive. Everyone likes inclusive, right? We don't tell you can't come here because your eyes are the wrong color, or because you speak the wrong language, or you like dogs instead of cats. We're an inclusive site, right? But also safe. What does safe mean, right? Her next tweet, at some point you have to exclude someone. You get to pick if it's the people feeling unsafe or the people making them feel unsafe. So at some point you have to exclude somebody, because if you let everybody come in, people come in and do terrible things. So you have to, at a certain point, exclude somebody. Who do you want to exclude? Do you want to exclude the people who don't feel safe because there's a bulletin board about how to rape women, and that kind of makes the women on Reddit not feel very good that, they are somehow associated with the same website where this board exists? Or do you want the people who are making the let me tell you how to rape women subreddit, do you want to make them leave? You have to exclude somebody, because if you let everybody in, some people are not going to feel safe or comfortable or welcome in this community. These 2 tweets basically sum it up. And incredibly, every time I read anything from these Reddit people, they make the decision of like, what we really want is for the people to be able to make the rape boards. Like, not the specific examples. I don't even know if they ban them or whatever. But like, some people are made to feel uncomfortable by what pretty much anyone would say is vile, terrible ideas and behavior. And it's like, well, they need to be allowed to do that because we are the government of the United States, and we must allow them the freedom to put their words into our database servers. Therefore, free speech. Sorry, I just got to let them do that. It's just, it boggles my mind. It makes me angry and frustrated, mostly because there is a lot of good stuff on Reddit. Because again, the people who are making the cute cat pictures, those cat pictures are really cute. They're not bothering anybody, right? And the thing is, I think I saw a graph somewhere trying to show like the overlap between the various boards. There is some surprising overlap, but it's sometimes not so surprising overlap. Like, how many people are member of the white supremacy board, but also member of the cute cat pictures board? Okay, how about members of the white supremacy board and members of the men's rights board? All right, and you start to see a little bit more. Members of Gamergate and members of the Young Nazis of America board. Like, like it's not 100% overlap, but I would love to see a graph of like, are the cat people really just cat people, or are so many people love cats that an equal number of neo-Nazis are in the cat boards as are in every other board? I don't know. Anyway, I think that it is a ridiculous thing that the people running Reddit can't seem to get a handle on the idea that they get to choose what kind of people get to put words into their database servers, and they seem incapable of making any sort of common sense decision about what should be allowed to happen on Reddit. Or maybe they're just totally for it. Like maybe they're anarchists. Maybe they say, we want to run a bunch of servers and we want to let everyone say anything. Go for it, man. Like, there you go. That's what you're going to do. But that's why people keep talking like the downfall of Reddit and everything, because I think most people who use Reddit had an idea that the people who ran Reddit had similar standards to them about what is and isn't sort of decent and acceptable. And if the people who run Reddit want to let everybody do everything, the rest of the people, I have to think, are just going to slowly fade away, because no one wants to be associated with a site like that. Like, a very small number of people, you're just going to turn into, 4chan or 8chan, right? Like, if if you let everybody in, eventually everybody leaves except for the most terrible people. And congratulations, Reddit, you are running a site filled with the most terrible people. Feel free to do that. Feel free to let them all type in text boxes to each other. I hope you feel good about the new site you've built, because that's what you're effectively creating by allowing anybody to do everything.
I don't have much to say on Reddit because I don't know anything about Reddit. And every time I have visited it for something, either trying to find information on something or following a link there, every visit to it has made me never want to visit it again. Literally, like I'm not exaggerating. Every time I'm like, oh, this is terrible. Why do people like? And I know, like academically, I know there are good parts of it. I've never stumbled upon those really.
I never read a good Ask Me Anything. Or I am a thing.
Those are usually really hard to navigate. First of all, I hate nested comments. Like, I was an old forum nerd back in the day, so I know the problems with both nested comments and also flat threads. They both have dysfunction, just different dysfunction. So I'm very familiar with the challenges in both the community monitoring and regulation, and also the technical side of how community software online, how this community style thing is built and how things are enforced. It's a very hard problem. Not to mention my time at Tumblr, we saw a lot of things not quite the same level as what Reddit is dealing with, but a lot of kind of related problems of things like, like every couple days we'd get a phone call from like a high school principal or like some kind of like, middle of nowhere police department or something, complaining about something that some kid said about some other kid on Tumblr and wanting us to take it down. And like when you have to deal with stuff like that when you're a community site, it's dealing with community stuff is just really messy. It's very difficult, and it's very, very messy for all the reasons you just said, John. Like, there's a lot of these decisions that there is no good option. You just have to choose between two bad options. And a lot of things, like what I was saying with my cell download stuff earlier, like a lot of these things, like, you just have to pick the lesser of two evils. And, no matter what you pick, it's going to have big downsides for someone, or it's going to disincentivize good stuff or incentivize bad stuff.
But we're not even at the hard questions. Like, they're the type of things like, am I allowed to threaten to rape somebody on Reddit? And the Reddit CEO is like, well, I'll allow it. Technically, it's not a threat of violence.
Oh, God.
Like, I mean, we're not talking about the people get into a heated argument and should they be allowed to call each other jerks and, like, sort of, ad hominem attacks are not allowed. Like, that's in the gray area. It's difficult to figure out or whatever. We're talking about just, like, straight up, like, racism, sexism, real threats of violence, and just and seriously, like the new CEO is like on the board going, responding to people. I'm not sure if that you're not sure. Like that's that's the kind of community you want. Again, I'm not saying he shouldn't be allowed to do this. Feel free to make this kind of community. But if he's like waffling, like these are the tough decisions, boy, should we allow rape threats or is that against the rule? I guess we have to allow it. I don't want that guy's speech to be impinged because I am the government of the United States of America.
Well, and I think, first of all, we should definitely say that the last episode of Hello Internet and the last two episodes of Rocket covered this probably way better than we can, because those are people who know a lot more about Reddit than we do. And so they really did a very good job of that. So listen to those if you want more of the inside stuff about, like, what specific challenges that the CEO of Reddit faces, and why Ellen Pao might have been good or bad for that. Anyway. But it seems like one of the big pressures they have now is business. They make some money, and they have this corporate owner, and they have a board of directors, and they want more money because the money they make is not really commensurate with the amount of traffic they get. They should be making a lot more.
But is this what you would do to make more money? Like, wouldn't you try to go mainstream? Like, don't you want to?
Well, so that's the thing. Like, so let me tell you another story from my past that's long and boring. The reason I'm telling it is because it's actually about the same coffee shop as the last long and boring story.
Oh God, here we go.
So this coffee shop in my hometown, Cup of Joe in Bexley, Ohio. They while I was there, they had a big problem where middle schoolers discovered it. And so it was always packed full of 12-year-olds who were just kind of loitering around, hardly buying anything, but just taking up all the seats and hanging around outside and kind of standing around smoking and all. It was just not a great scene, and it kind of drove other customers away, because who wants to hang out around a bunch of delinquent middle schoolers who are bored and loitering and not doing anything and smoking? And so one summer, they banned them. I don't know how. It doesn't really matter how. They banned all the middle schoolers. They implemented some kind of like minimum age thing, or you had to be with a parent or whatever. It doesn't matter. Somehow they banned them. And for a while, the place was empty. And I knew the manager at the time, and I asked him, like, how was this going? And he said they were making more money than ever. Because even though it wasn't getting the volume it got before, it was getting more of the profitable customers, the older people, the college students who were there studying and buying drinks all day, the people who would come in the morning and come in the evenings, who were just buying stuff, drinking it, and leaving, and making cycling the tables more often, not putting off other people like when they come in there. And I don't know how they resolved that. I left, but I was very surprised at the time, and looking back on it, I shouldn't be, that worked so well for them. And Reddit, I think, faces not that different of a dilemma here, where it's like, if they want to become more mainstream, if they want to become more attractive to advertisers and therefore more profitable, if they want the value of their ads to go up, if they want the number of advertisers to go up, I think they have to get rid of all this garbage. They have to get rid of all this, anarchist/libertarian free speech crazy people who are really just aggressive, hateful people for a lot of them. Not all of them, obviously, but many of them are these just very aggressive, hateful people who feel entitled to have their words all over the place. I think you can't have both ways. You can't have that garbage on your site that is highly offensive, legally questionable. No advertiser wants to be associated with that, and also make more money with advertising. You have to pick one or the other.
And it seems like they're trying to hide the most objectionable stuff. Like, okay, a lot of people are offended by this, but we won't run ads against it, so we're technically not making money off of it. And everyone's like, well, you're just subsidizing it with the other stuff, and we'll put it off in the corner, and they'll stay by themselves. And it's like, why are you bending over backwards to make sure that these people have a place to share hate with each other? Never mind, that it's not just, we're just letting them put their words into our database. If you want to go out to the sort of secondary effects of allowing a place for people to reinforce each other's hateful ideas and recruit new people, and no incitement to violence, that's against the Reddit guidelines. Yeah, I'm sure that will work exactly as intended when you get a bunch of hateful people talking to each other constantly over and over again and sharing hateful pictures and videos and all sorts of terrible things. I'm sure nothing bad will come out of that. It'll just be positive, as long as they stay within the terms and conditions. No, it's so ridiculous. It's so asinine. And again, if that's the site they want to run, go for it. But if their job is to make money for their parent company, this is not the way to do it. And using your middle school coffee shop example, it's as if at a certain point, all the non-middle schoolers left, and all that was left was middle school students. And you realize, well, now we have to cater to them because they're our only customers. They're, not that Reddit is at this point, but it's if you suddenly turn into, well, I guess we have to become a dance club or something, right? Because everyone else is gone, right?
Oh, God.
Reddit is not at that point, not even close to it. But if you just keep going down this path, I feel like the regular people will leave, and you'll just be left with we are a community of hate speech bulletin boards, because these people have no place else to go. It's like 8chan or 4chan to a lesser extent, That's not the kind of business you want to run. That's not a growth market. That's not a lot of people with a lot of spending power. If you want money, you want to go mainstream. And it just seems like the Reddit CEO is trying to preserve this idea of we provide a forum for people to openly share ideas, and that's sort of a high-minded ideal of Reddit, but the consequences of it are not going to be good for Reddit's bottom line, or for the popularity of Reddit, or for Reddit's reputation, or for his reputation, or just anything really. It just seems like all downside. And again, let him go ahead. If that's what the company wants to do, feel free to pursue that path. But I don't see it turning into anything good for anyone involved.
So this probably doesn't mean anything for the purpose of our discussion, and I probably shouldn't take as a sign of me being right or wrong about this, but that coffee shop closed last fall.
Coffee shops close all the time. I know.
It sounded like the building they were in sold to get knocked down and built something bigger. Ugh.
Yeah, but I don't know. That's part of the whole ideal of the sort of the. Someone in the chat room said there really is a Reddit community. I think there's a stereotype of a typical Reddit user that's perhaps somewhat accurate, but I think there are a lot of people, like all three of us, who don't go to Reddit unless someone links to it. And when we link to it, we look at the funny cat gif and then we move on with our lives, right? Like, but are we Reddit users? Are we part of the community? We're not part of the community, but we follow, it's a popular site. People link you to it. You end up there. You look at something and then you go someplace else. I think a lot of that traffic is from things like that. I don't know. Maybe they know the breakdowns. I don't know if most of their traffic comes from people just, posting hate to each other and over again, or getting in big arguments in 17-level indented comment threads attached to things. Maybe that is where their stuff comes from. It just seems to me it's a bad decision. I think less of the people who run Reddit every time I hear one of their decisions or see them in these sort of like lawyerly nuanced discussions as they try to parse what should and shouldn't be acceptable behavior on Reddit and just reveal themselves to have no understanding of other people's experiences. And, it's, again, I'm sure that all the specific examples I cited in this podcast are not accurate. Feel free to wander Reddit yourself and try to find out what these people's opinions are. But every time I see anything from them, every time I go to Reddit and see these discussions with the new leadership behind Reddit, I just think, like, I was excited when the Ellen Pao came in and started making changes, like really straightforward, sensible changes. Get rid of the hate groups, and it was like, oh, you can't get rid of the hate groups. What do you mean? Like, and it's just. I don't know the details. I don't know why she was pushed out. I'm sure she was subject to the same harassment that every woman gets who opens her mouth and says anything ever, let alone is the CEO of a company, is in charge of a bunch of little man-children who are just angry about everything.
Especially that company. Like, I can't imagine a more hostile. Well, maybe there are some, but that was definitely on the more hostile side.
Yeah, and I don't know if she I have no idea what her did, but all I know is that the few things I heard announced come out of her leadership seemed like good ideas, and then was backlash against them. I felt depressed about, and then when she was kicked out, I got even more depressed. And then seeing the views of the new CEO, who is apparently one of the founders, it's just like, no, they're not getting it. So anyway, Reddit is really not for me. And furthermore, I think if Reddit's goals are to be a place that continues to have a lot of traffic and that makes a lot of money, that the current strategy they're pursuing doesn't make any sense to me.
I think the other thing that I find fascinating about all this, which I kind of hinted at earlier, is how a group of users for of a website can seemingly have so much influence that they can cause the chief executive officer of a company to be fired, dismissed, quit, whatever. That's just weird to me, that even a couple 100,000 people, I think I'd heard that there were a couple 100,000 signatures on this petition, this online petition, which isn't even really signatures, but whatever, that many people came together to decide to try to oust a CEO, man, woman, it doesn't matter. Like that's just insane to me that the users of a website, none of whom I think are paying the website any money, seem to think that they can have that kind of influence, and in numbers seem to have that kind of influence. And I think a lot of this started, if I understand things correctly, because a really beloved moderator was dismissed or something like that. I guess the person who did
this is really about ethics in gaming journalism. It's like that was not really the reason. Like that was like what ignited a lot of the argument, but it was really a lot of other pressures, I think. That's what it sounds like. But and especially because it was, even that is just like the game journalism BS line. Even that official storyline is questionable because she didn't fire that moderator. The male co-founder did.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, this whole thing's a mess. Anyway, it's getting into details of it is just a rat hole. There's no good to come of diving into the details of it, because that's not really what the argument was about. And what it comes down to is if a whole bunch of users were calling for someone's head, and that resulted in her getting what I call quit fired, which is, she was forced to quit. that was not, oh, I think I'm just done now, coincidentally this week. No, she was quit fired. It's cool. Happens to the best of us. But that wouldn't have happened if just some angry users who are, hateful, horrible people, if just they had a problem with her. The reason that happened, I think you can read into who they appointed instead. This other co-founder who's been gone for a while, who has these very much like, libertarian kind of anything goes viewpoints. If the board appointed him as the new CEO, that means that the members of the board and the people, who have control and equity and influence of the company, a good portion of them want this anything goes attitude to stay. It's not enough that a whole bunch of users complained. If only these users were getting angry, and these users are people who are not particularly credible, who you don't really want to cater to if you can help it, that wouldn't have been enough to get her out. This only gave the people in power a motivating reason to get her out now, because she was pushing in a direction that not that the users didn't want, that they didn't want, that the power holders did not want. And they put in a guy who is the complete opposite in this area. In this area, of like trying to keep things tame and under control, or being more everything goes. So obviously, the people who own and control the company want it to be the other way.
Yeah, I think the CEO situation, again, I don't think the details are important. It's just basically like a vote of no confidence. It was a vote of no confidence from the most vocal users with the whole petition thing, and apparently a vote of no confidence from the board. It just seems like, you came in, you started to make some bold changes, but in the end, we are not behind you. This is the board saying this. In the end, we do not support your decisions enough to let you see this through, and we're changing course, and you're out. Right? So that's what it comes down to. It's like it's lots of company. If you're going to be the leader of a company, you either actually have to have absolute power, in which case you can weather any storm and do what you want to do, or if there are people who are bosses of you, and they, from their perspective, they don't have confidence that the changes you're going to make are good, and they're hearing a lot of noise from the users, and the users are the most vocal users are saying with their actions and their words that they don't like what you're doing either. You can imagine a board that's nervous about a company. It's like, oh, we have this thing. We think it can be good. This person comes in, makes a bunch of changes, and then all I hear is a bunch of noise and bad things. Change course. Right? And then the new course, like some people in the chat room are saying, this new CEO is going to, get rid of the bad even more than she could. That's possible, because it's kind of like only Nixon can go to China, like in Reddit. Only a man can make changes. Because people will only accept, like, the same exact words come out of this guy's mouth, and everyone's like, oh, that's interesting. I'd like to hear more of your ideas. And as she says it, it's like, you are destroying our freedom. Like, so it's, I just go back to this thing. Like, what kind of community do these people want Reddit to be? Who do they want to be in this community? And what do they want it to be like? What do they want the experience of Reddit to be like? Same thing for the Twitter people. What do you want the experience of Twitter to be like? I mean, the Twitter CEO at least came out and said, we are terrible about dealing with harassment. Do you want Twitter to be a place where you go, and if you are any type of group that's typically harassed, you're going to get harassed and you have no recourse? Twitter's trying to make that better by having the tools to report people, not require, I think originally way back in the day on Twitter, if you reported someone for harassment, you had to inform the person that you were informing on them, like it was part of the process. Like they would send them an email and say, hey, just so you know, this person reported you for harassment or something like that. It was just a crazy setup made by people who didn't understand the dynamics of harassment. Anyway, like I said, Reddit, they can do what they want, but when I hear everything I hear coming out of this company so far is making me, now I'm at the point where I'm almost like questioning whether I want to tap links to what I know is probably good content that I'll enjoy, like the interviews or, funny cat pictures and stuff like that. And now I feel like, by tapping this link, am I supporting an organization that is trying to, make a home for people who I think should not have a home? Let's put it this way. I wouldn't give these people a home on a website that I ran. These people give them a home on the website that they run, which is fine, but do I want to support that with my clicks and whatever ads I'm going to load by tapping that? That's the point where I am with Reddit, where I'm thinking that. And I've never thought that about Twitter. Maybe it's because I don't feel like I'm viewing ads in Twitter because I'm using a third-party client or whatever. But at this point with the Reddit links, I don't even know, even in my casual usage, if I'm going to continue to do it.
You just install an ad blocker. Thanks a lot to our 3 sponsors this week, Lynda.com, Hover, and MailRoute. We will see you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYL. ISS, so that's Casey List, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA, Syracuse, it's accidental. They didn't mean to, accidental. Tech podcast so long.
Boy, I hope no one who is big in Reddit listens to our show, because it's just going to be a long series of corrections about everything we got wrong about Reddit. That's why I keep trying to pull back to the big picture. Big picture, we are casual users. It seems like a place I don't want to hang out.
Yeah, as I said, like literally every time I've gone there, I've been turned off to it.
I don't have that problem. I've gone to good content, but just like, boy, everything I read about it, and every time I dive into these threads, I'm like, that screenshot can't be real. This is obviously Photoshopped. And I'll go to the actual site and find the actual comment. I'm like, this guy? This is the guy who's in charge now? This is not like someone impersonating him? The site hasn't been hacked? Like, these are the real words out of these people's mouths? Like, not, it's basically saying, not a place I want to hang out or be associated with.
Yeah.
This is probably going to sound weird, but I get really turned off by Reddit because I know a few people. I know certainly plenty of people online that use Reddit, and I know a handful of people in real life that use Reddit, and it's kind of creepy to me how people who take Reddit really seriously seem to think that, and one of you said this earlier, the entirety of the internet happens because of Reddit. Like, anything that's good on the internet, it's because of Reddit, according to these people. And that's just, I don't know, it's almost like a cult. And I don't mean that, I don't know, I'm sure someone's going to be offended by that. And I don't mean it to be offensive. It's just, it's the closest analogy I can think of, is that, oh man, you don't understand. Reddit is where the internet happens, man. It's because of us. That's why you know all this cool stuff. And every GIF that's ever been on the internet, that's because of us, man.
There's no place else to get GIFs.
Right.
Nope.
And it's just, I don't know. It's creepy to me. And that, I find that to be a real turnoff. And admittedly, I'm very ignorant when it comes to Reddit. Like you guys have said, I'll browse over to something, typically like an IMA or an AMA, and then I'll leave. And that's that. But God, it just seems so weird and creepy and cultish to me that I've never wanted to invest any real time in it. And now with their tacit, if not explicit, support of all these hate groups, no thank you. Not for me.
There is something to that, like the whole of, you get enough people together who are enthusiastic about sharing things with each other, and they make these little communities. Like, that is what makes the internet great. But you have to realize that when you reach a certain level of popularity, you will, percentage-wise, you will inevitably get a certain subset of people who exhibit what most of us would consider to be bad behavior. That they're abusive to people. They do obnoxious things like griefing and trolling. They make your site worse. And so most sites have at least an attempt to come up, especially if this is the whole thing, it's just a big community, come up with a set of rules to try to contain that. And the perverse thing about Reddit is like, no, our philosophy is we don't do that. That's the whole thing, man. Just anything goes. Again, anything goes except you can't hack us. We don't like that. That is antisocial. But anything else, anything goes. You type anywhere. It's like, that's how every community dies. Like that. Back in the Usenet days, you'd see entire news groups go south because a set of bad people would come in. They'd make everyone miserable because you can't stop them from posting in the news group. You add them to your kill files, but it would just like to be, there's eventually people, okay, fine, this group is yours. We'll leave and we'll go start a different group. This belongs to you now. You can talk about whatever you want here, and we'll go elsewhere. And that I think is the dynamic. If you have a very popular community, you have to have some kind of rules to control things. Otherwise, you will inevitably only be left with the worst of the worst, because there are some set of people who are going to be obnoxious, and other people don't want to be around obnoxious people. And eventually, all you're left with are obnoxious people.
Yeah, I mean this whole mess of what it takes to maintain a community site and all the garbage you have to deal with as the platform owner. Like I saw a lot of this at Tumblr. I've seen a lot in the past with the sites I've been a part of. It has made me never want to make something that includes like hosting user published content ever again. And someday I might forget that I'm saying this and do it anyway. But like there, like some features of Overcast that I have considered doing are some related things, like, oh, maybe it'd be cool to make like a podcast CMS and host podcasts for people, like the Tumblr for podcasts kind of thing. And then I think, oh, well, then I have to deal with all this crap. I have to deal with, oh, well, someone's going to post, a hate podcast, and I gotta hear from some police officers and then take it down and deal with them, arguing with me. And it's like, I don't want to have to deal with any of that. It's so much, and even simple things like user reviews of podcasts. I never want to do that for so many reasons, and this is one of them. Like, there's so many things, like, I don't want to have to deal with. It's like the position I take is much like some of the design decisions Nintendo has made with online gameplay. It's like you don't really give people a way to be horrible, so you don't have to deal with it. That's generally my goal, is like just make products that don't involve people publishing stuff on something you own and you having to deal with the ramifications.
It's hard work, and volume-wise, you got a problem, but I'm boggled by the easy decisions. I feel like if you did like a podcast hosting thing and someone put up like KKK Weekly, I would feel like, no, boom, out. And why do you get to cut off? It's my company. I get to pick what I want. And it's like, oh, slippery slope. Don't try to put your podcast on Marco because he censors you. I honestly think that nobody would be like, because Marco got rid of the KKK podcast, we should not put our podcast on his site because he's obviously, like, the whole slippery slope censor thing. Like, most people will be like, all right, well, duh. Like, why would he want that there? Why, And it's like, well, he was going to ban that. What else is he going to ban? What about if he doesn't like vegetarians? I can't have my vegetarian podcast. Really? Are you really afraid of that? Like, I feel like that is your job as someone who starts or runs a company, to say, yes, I am imposing my values on the private company that I own. Like, that's what I'm doing. I am not the U.S. government. If I don't want vegetarians, I can ban them. And then they can say, don't go to Marco's podcast site because he banned that vegetarian podcast and he's a censor. All right, well, fine. Then that is up to you, Marco, to decide what are you going to ban and what are you going to... But I honestly think if you ban the KKK podcast, nobody who you care about is going to say, well, I'm not going to go there because he banned that KKK podcast. Well, then go someplace else. I'm not the only private internet in the world that will store your text in my database, right? Make your own site, go somewhere else. Like, obviously you get down to the hard decisions. All right, well, what if you're a staunch Democrat? Do you want Republican podcasts or whatever? Oh, don't go there because that's like... You build the community through your decisions. If you didn't allow Republican podcasts and only allowed Democrat ones, guess what? You'd have an entire site filled with Democrat and left-leaning sites. Is that the thing you wanted to build? If it's not, then you made a bad decision. If it is, congratulations. You are the world's biggest collector of, left-leaning political podcasts in the United States. Like, you design your own community by deciding what you want to let in and what you don't want to let in. And not making any decision is a very big decision in and of itself. I don't know. I just don't know. I find it depressing.
Yeah, well, I mean, and the biggest problem is that Reddit is this big public online community that seems, from the little I know about it, it seems to have, by design and intentionally, incredibly light moderation. And I've never seen an online community that had very light to no moderation where that worked out well. It just doesn't work.
It's not. I think they have heavy moderation, but just within the groups. And if you don't like it, start your own subreddit, and then you can be the moderator, and then you get to decide the rules. Like, that's the whole system. It's like you can make your own little cabal and have whatever rules you want.
Well, but so the site as a whole doesn't practice heavy moderation, because you can just create your own hate area over here.
That's why people think of it as the internet. Like, oh, it's not. No, Reddit is the internet. Like, yeah, within your subreddit, you can have rules and you can have mods, and you can say, in this subreddit, you can only post things in Pig Latin. If you post anything not in Pig Latin, you'll be banned and we'll vote you down. Like, fine, whatever you want. But that's like, they have perfect control. But the whole of Reddit, you telling me I can't start my own subreddit? Censorship. Reddit is the internet. No, it's not.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking. Like, in general, there is seemingly little to no moderation of the entire Reddit community. It is, yes, within subreddits you can moderate, but there, so the community at large has very little. And we've seen, I've saw so many times in the past community, like one of my best online community experiences was the time I spent on the Something Awful forums. And I know it sounds stupid now to a lot of people, but that, like, when I was there, I don't know what it's like now, but when I was there in the early 2000s, very heavily, I basically lived there. That was my internet. it was insanely well run because it was very tightly moderated and there was a paywall to get in. And so you didn't have problems of spam. You didn't have people being total jerks because if they were, they'd get banned and they'd lose their $10. And if they wanted to cut back in, they had to pay $10 again. So like it was incredibly healthy. I mean, I know it sounds crazy to people who know of something awful like on a surface level, but it was an incredibly well-run community because it had very distinct rules and they were enforced very, very well most of the time. And so you didn't have this kind of like rush of craziness from the public and just hate everywhere constantly. It was very well run. And I was a member of other communities before and after that were way, way less well run. Twitter being a good example. I mean, Twitter is not quite the same thing, but it has many of the same challenges. And there are many, many problems when once you start removing layers of moderation and involvement by moderators, and you start permitting more and more things and having fewer and fewer filters, it deteriorates very, very quickly into all these things that people hate about Reddit.
I think the Ars Technica comments are a good example because they are also kind of like, we don't want to stop anybody from saying whatever they want to say, so on and so forth, but they have guidelines that seem unenforceable. They basically have like, don't insult other people, like no ad hominem attacks, right? That's like, oh, that's totally unenforceable. How can you have a board where people argue over, Mac versus PC or argue about Scientology or argue about global warming and enforce that? It's impossible to enforce. People are going to call each other jerks, right? They do it with human beings. Human beings look at things and say, is this person just saying something that the only purpose is to put this other person down and doesn't add anything to the argument? Like, then you can, I mean, this is even before they had downvoting. Like, the moderators would come in and moderate a particular comment by a particular person, and then they would complain about it, and they would fight over it, and it's just a tremendous amount of work. But having those people in there constantly trying to make those decisions about, are you violating our posting guidelines? Because the posting guidelines were just so, like, it's seemingly unenforceable, certainly not machine enforceable, and people can just make new accounts and so on and so forth, but they had a few things over there. One, having an account with a lot of posts and a long registration date was seen as something like valuable, like you had reputation based on how long you'd been there and how many posts you'd made and so on and so forth. Again, this is even before voting. So people didn't want to just abandon their account and start a new one, and that meant that essentially the equivalent of Twitter eggs were like kind of an indicator that maybe someone is just here to cause problems if they have like one post and they registered their account today or whatever, even though registering the account was free, stuff like that. But just having those moderators in there trying and basically failing, because this, you can't place a community this large, but just trying to do it, knowing that if you say something too obnoxious, like it's kind of like, speeding. If you go 70 miles an hour, maybe fine. But if you go 300 miles an hour, someone's going to find you and stop you eventually, right? People would, and so people get moderated, people get banned, people make new accounts, those new accounts get banned. It's just a constant battle. Like, I just feel like having people in there trying to do the right thing according to, it lets you know, what does Ars Technica think is the right thing to do? Ars Technica thinks the right thing to do is to not be insulting to each other. It's not, again, not a high bar. People can still say some pretty terrible things within the limits of the guidelines, but it lets you know, is this a site where I'm going to come on and people are going to tell me to kill myself immediately? No, because that person eventually will get, their post will disappear and now they have downvoting and that account will get banned. And like, there are people fighting on the side of the users, so to speak. There are people there trying to moderate, and as unsuccessful as it may be, it sends a signal about the site. Like, the site sort of has a personality, and the personality is this bad thing that most people think is bad. This site also believes is bad and is trying to do something about, even though it's really hard.